Trevor, thank you for being on my podcast.
My pleasure.
We had a wonderful lunch, at least I did. You just had soup. You only had soup. So what I want to ask you, Trevor, I've been seeing you around the club for years, because you've been a member of this club for 30 years now?
February 1992, so almost 30 years.
Right. And tell me how you first, not how you first, what I want to know about your childhood, where you grew up, where you're from.
Well, I was born in April 1955, basically Essex, which is just east of London. I lived first 16 years in a place called Dagenham, which is famous for, say, the biggest Ford's plant outside of the United States of America. Normal education, infant school at 5, junior school, and then high school. I left school at just turned 16. Went to work in the city for a stockbroker.
At 15, right?
16.
At 16.
I interviewed at 15.
At 15, yeah.
I took my high school exam in June of 1971 when I was 16 and 2 months.
Right.
So I finished my exams on the Thursday. On Saturday, my mum took me to buy a new suit, and on Monday I started work. On Monday, July the 3rd. I retired June 30th last year, so I worked for 49 years. Okay,
now you've skipped over a whole lot, so let's get back to, first of all,
right.
You have a brother that's 15 years older than you?
I have a brother who's 15 years older than me, a half-brother. Our mum's first husband passed away when he was just a baby.
Okay.
My mum remarried later, and then I have a sister as well, as a full sister. But say my half brother, a full sister.
Right.
My parents both passed away.
Right.
My father was 80, my mum when she was 75.
Right.
My dad, initially he worked in Fords at Dagenham. Later he actually got a job in London, but initially worked for Fords. That's why we lived in Dagenham. He was a very good sportsman. That's where I get my sporting knowledge from.
I should mention that because I've watched you all the time. I mean, even at the old time, always playing squash.
Yeah.
Always coming there playing squash. Now, we talked a little bit about your childhood too, because you said growing up, you had disadvantage compared to the other kids, but you never let that stop you from doing what you're doing.
I was born handicapped, all down my right side. What happened was my mother, during the birth, had a heart attack.
How many months was she pregnant?
She was delivering.
When she was delivering, she had a heart attack.
Yeah, and so basically I believe it's a lack of oxygen to the brain. I had a reason for an MRI when I was 42, and the MRI shows brain damage caused from a lack of oxygen. It happened during the birth.
Okay.
Something to do with my mother's thyroid. My mum was a very active woman. She was a ballroom dancer. Her favourite actor was Fred Astaire.
That was my favourite actor too. I thought he was the classiest guy on the planet.
She loved Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And my father, was a sportsman. He was in the army for a number of years. During the war, he was actually in Burma, which is now Myanmar. He was a regimental sergeant major.
Okay.
He was a very good sportsman.
But how long did he stay in the service?
Do you know? No. He never ever discussed his army.
That's typical of people that age.
Yeah.
My father was the same way.
Yeah. He never discussed. He never ever discussed his army career. I know I read his service record. It was very, very distinguished.
I can imagine.
Very good things about him being reliable. And I think I'm reliable, and I got that from my father. But he was a good tennis player, and he was an army champion. And so on my father's side of the family, I have cousins who are professional cricket players, like baseball in the States. Another one is a semi-professional footballer, including an England cap, and also a very good golfer.
Okay.
So my dad's side of the family is very sporting. My sister, she's older than me. She still plays to this day. she's 69. She still plays tennis and badminton and teaches netball.
Right.
She's a very good swimmer, county swimmer, county netball player. So the whole family, my dad's side is very sporting, and I've always been very sporting.
Yes, you said you played everything. You did everything that was in there.
I was very lucky as a child growing up. We lived right next, as I said, near a park, and this park. I mean, Dagenham is a very working class area, but this park had a Olympic swimming pool, a pitch and putt, which you call par 3.
Yeah, it was called par 3, right?
A stadium with the football pitches, a running track, enough space for 10 cricket pitches, 15 football pitches, swings, tennis courts, bowling green for my father, everything. So, growing up, I was always playing.
But that's because the Ford plant was there, and there was so much money coming in from that, because that was the second largest.
Dagenham was very much a town built around Ford's works.
Okay.
There's Dagenham, there's also a place called Dagenham East. Dagenham East is very near just off the Thames River. So in those days you had the barges and everything. So Ford's was built near the river, and railway lines into London, everything. Built around Ford's, and say my infant school was called Ford's Infant School. My junior school was called Ford's Junior School. So very much part of Dagenham was built around the Ford's plant. Which sadly, I think 25 years ago, closed down. Like many plants, a bit like Detroit.
So what is that your town doing now? Because everything's gone. Have you been back since it's closed?
I haven't been back for 15 years.
15 years.
My daughter, who lives in England, went back last year, and she sent me some photographs of the street where I firstly spent my early years, and the park is still there.
Okay.
But all the stadium's gone, the swimming pool's gone.
They've actually taken them all away.
It's all grass. It's stadium's gone, the swimming pool's gone, the golf course is gone. It's just a massive green area now, and people can walk the dog and go for a run.
That's it. My goodness. Okay, so that's your early age, and then you told me you started working when you were 16.
16, yeah.
So let's get into that route again. I like that.
Well, when you're in England, now we have what's called the comprehensive system for school. But in my day, it was when you were 11, you took an exam. Depending on the result, you went to what they called a state school, just secondary education, or you went to what called a grammar school, which is higher learning. And I passed my exam and went to a grammar school where you're taught slightly higher standards, higher level of maths, higher level of various subjects. When I was 15, I took my O-level mock exams, and then took those in February. Went to London. I went for 2 job interviews. One was an accountant who wanted A-level students, which was 18, and I was going to leave at the end of the year when I was 16. A stockbroker at Jefferies and Chase said, "When can you start?" As I say, so I said, "Oh well, my last exam is end of June. I can start beginning of July." Exactly what I did. I had no idea what finance was. I had no idea what stockbrokers were.
But you knew you were good at numbers.
I always knew I was good at numbers.
Because
I say, as a kid growing up, I was always, and before I started school, I already knew my times tables.
But who taught you?
Me.
How do you go about teaching yourself the time to? You got the book.
Yeah.
But who taught you to read? That's something I'm curious about. Your mom
at school? No. My parents were both working, and my sister was slightly older than me, so she would teach me some things, but not much, because brother and sister, 3 years apart, we were very, very different.
Right.
You know,
to say the least, yeah.
And she's actually much smarter than I am. But I was very good at maths at an early age, and I just throughout my life I always fell into things. My job, say, accountants, because I was doing at school, I was taking like maths, commerce, accounting. Because
you were good at it.
Good at it.
Right.
I wasn't taking languages. I wasn't taking music because I was bad at it.
But you stayed in the areas that you loved.
Yeah, exactly. So
without thinking about what it would lead to.
No idea. I knew I had to. I always knew from an early age that I had to work in an office. I couldn't do manual labour because of my physical problems. Right. So it was always going to be my most important muscle was my brain.
Okay.
So I fell into stockbroking just as a back office. I mean, in those days, it's very different nowadays. My first week at work, I had to work in the messages department.
Okay.
And it's the way the firm did. Basically, messages you run around the Bank of England, around the stock exchanges. You deliver. Right. You deliver messages. You deliver documents.
Right.
And that's the one way you learn about the City of London.
Okay. So you know all the streets.
You've got to go to the Bank of England and take this. You've got to go to the stock exchange, take that. You've got to go to so and so firm and take this. So you're learning about the City of London for just 1 week. And it's funny because I really enjoyed that, and I was quite enjoyed it. But
now at that time, were you still while you were 16?
yes, I was just
16.
16.
So you're a runner. Week. So you basically called a runner, right? So
yeah,
you're
exactly. Yeah, because most of the messages in the department were, I'll say, the average age was 60.
Okay, right.
And I was
16.
And then
that big gap, and you're 16. So they made you go.
I was there for a week just to learn various places in the city. Like where Lloyd's, these insurance brokers were.
Right.
Where the Bank of England is, where stock exchange is. So you knew where the buildings were.
Right. And but there's something else you said to me too, because I'm just thinking, were you actually physically running to these places, or did you have a bicycle?
Walk fast.
You walk fast.
Yeah.
Walk fast.
Sometimes when I was working, not long ago, I was working in the back office in the transfer department. You had to get certain documents to a building by, let's say, 11:30.
Okay.
You'd leave the office at 11:25, and you would run.
You'd run to get there.
With 2 bags full of documents.
Right.
You'd run like 500 meters or 800 meters to get there by 11:30. So they were really in time for that day's business.
Right.
Yeah, that was quite funny.
And you did that for a year or just for a couple of months?
I did that for 2 years.
2 years
in the back office, and then so I became slightly bored with it.
What do you mean? It was your choice to leave if you wanted to, or what do you mean? What?
Yeah, I wanted a bigger challenge. It was, the job was not challenging enough.
Okay.
Just in the back office doing documents and sending letters. Sending letters about missing share certificates or missing, So it was quite bored. I was getting bored with it. I wanted more. And I got a phone call. I went to an agency. I'm looking for a new job. I got a phone call one night, and the firm was called Model Rowland, which is an American firm. I had no idea. I just turned 18. It was set up by 2 Jewish men who left in the late 1930s. And their story is funny as well, because these 2 guys had no money. They actually set up a financial firm called Model Rowland. Eventually, then became Shields Model, and then became part of the Beige Group.
With no money at all, how could they do that?
Well, the story goes that they set up an office and a brokerage office in New York, in Manhattan somewhere, and someone brought in some share certificates to sell. And one of the guys was talking to the client. The other guy took the documents, went round to the bank, and put them in the bank, cashed them in, so they get the money for the documents to pay for the sale. It's an amazing story about these two Jewish guys that set up this firm in the 1930s from nothing.
Huge.
Yeah. Huge.
Does it still exist?
Well, say Model Rowland became Shields Model became Beige, and Beige is part of the Beige Group.
Okay.
So
you got a job there, and then
I got a job there when I was 18.
Doing what?
I was the boy on the desk. We was trading equity, and also fixed income. And the equity side was companies like British Petroleum, Royal Dutch Shell. They'd have shares listed on the London Stock Exchange and ADRs in New York, American Depository Receipts.
Okay.
And you could arbitrage between the price of the ADRs in dollars and the BP or shares in pound sterling.
Okay.
And you could arbitrage between the two, and you could transfer from ADRs to shares and vice versa. And you can broker between the difference in pricing between New York and London. Remember, this is a time of no mobile phones. There was a phone.
Right, you're right.
Mobile phones.
Telex.
Telex. So, and I was just taking down prices. In those days, brokers were like, this was before Big Bang in 1986. You had jobbers in London were basically market makers for equities, and brokers who just get prices. They'd relay the prices to me. I'd write them down and relay them to Julian, who was the trader, and then he'd decide to buy or sell because the price is different between London and New York.
Right.
Or they might think the share price will go up in New York, so let's buy them in London first before it goes up in New York, and make money on the difference. And so Mr. Rowland was very, very smart. Back in the day, 1983, there was BP had a rights issue.
Okay.
They basically issued shares. But if you were involved, if you were one of the leading investment banks for the rights issue, you could not trade the shares. So Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citicorp in the States who were leading this deal, and they could not trade BP shares during the sale of the rights issue. And Mr. Rowland declined to be part of the initial offering, so he could continue to trade the shares during the day. And this was back in March '83. And Julian, my boss, lived in Chelmsford, which is like 50 miles from London, and British Rail, very unreliable. I lived in Dagenham, underground to work every day. Bad, but reliable.
Reliable, okay, much more than British Rail.
So I'd get in the office at 8 o'clock. The market opened at 9:30, and Julian would come in, 8:30. And then do the business. Overnight from New York, we get a message from Mr. Rowland saying, please buy so many BP shares, or so many Shell shares, or so many British Tobacco shares. Normally at market, which means at best.
Okay.
And during the rights issue, so we could trade the shares that most of the big banks in New York couldn't. We had I was totally unaware of what I was doing. We had an order to buy these shares at market, and then on the telex overnight, which Julian would have. And for some reason the trains got delayed. Julian didn't arrive until after the market opened.
So what happened?
Basically, I'd asked my boss, what should I do? And the director of the bank, he said, no idea. So I asked the broker who was laying prices from the London Stock Exchange, what should I do? And he told me, I think you should buy the shares.
Yeah, okay.
I had no idea what I was doing. He said, I think you should buy them at the opening. So we got the prices, because in those days, the price was 50,000 shares at this price, 100,000 shares, this price plus a penny. Okay. Because the bigger the size, the bigger the price, because the more risk the market maker had. So basically, I decided on my own back as a very young man to buy, because my boss wasn't in yet, to go ahead and do the trade. And luckily enough, the price went up. By the time my boss came in, the price was higher. He was very happy with me. And by the time New York came in, they were much, much higher. Wow. So New York were very, very happy. And that was...
that's you started to get you became noticed.
Became noticed. In fact...
Now, how old were you when this happened?
I was 19.
So they thought you were a genius?
No, just thought...
Did they think it was luck? Did they think it was luck what you did? Or did they think that you really...
In many respects it was luck, but...
Of course it was, but you're not going to... No one's going to say that.
It was like also the fact that I was reliable. Also,
Okay.
I'd made a decision. I hadn't.
You had to make
I
the
hadn't
decision.
frozen.
Because
I
you
hadn't-
could have frozen if you'd done that.
I've done nothing. There's no gain. There's no loss.
We wouldn't be talking about your retirement right now
Yeah.
from the financial firms.
Yeah. I mean, if I'd done nothing, nothing
Right.
happened.
Nothing
It's
happened,
not my
right.
fault.
You
Julian's
made
late
a decision
to
and it was a
work.
good one,
It's
right.
It's going to be a good one. So the thing is, Julian, that turned out to be the day of my first official business lunch, because my boss then took me to lunch at a very famous fish restaurant called Wheeler's.
You never forgot it. Huh?
Never forgot it. Yeah.
Wow. That felt
Beautiful
good, huh?
food.
That felt
2-hour
good.
lunch.
Wow.
Drinking lots of wine, lots of vodka.
So where'd you go on from there? So from there, after you left that firm, where did you go?
I then went to a UK stockbroker firm called Greaves and Grant, who were actually, they're actually very active in Japanese convertible bonds.
Okay.
It's my first experience of dealing with Japan.
Or even thinking about Japan?
I didn't even know where Japan was. On the map.
Who did? Nobody really did.
I mean,
Right.
remember in England, we're an island race, and we're not very good about
Other countries, yeah.
yeah. So my first experience with Japan was Greaves and Grant, where I worked for 4 years, and then I was because we were dealing. And I was in the bond department trading things called Japanese convertible bonds. I was then approached by Nikko Securities to come and work for them. My boss was again an Englishman.
Okay.
All my bosses were Englishmen. This guy was Tony Whedon. He approached me to join him at Nikko Securities. I did to trade Japanese convertible bonds. This was 1981 by that time.
Right.
No, sorry, 81, because I joined in 71, 73,
10 years later,
74,
yeah. Okay.
77 I left, 73 I left Shepherd, 77 I left Model Roland, who were then Shields Model, and then joined Greaves and Grant till 81.
Okay.
So I hadn't been to Japan, been working 10 years. And then my last job was trading convertible bonds. And then in 82, my boss left to go to another firm. I didn't go with him, but I was unhappy working for the Japanese.
Okay.
Because at the time, working for the Japanese in London, I was frustrated because as a trader you make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
but as a trader for a Japanese company in London, the decisions are always made by the Japan head office, which is basically in Tokyo,
Okay.
and then relayed overnight.
Okay.
And then you had to follow those instructions. And this time, makes no sense. So I decided to look for a job, and I got a job at Bank of America.
So from Bank of America, what happened?
Bank of America, I left Bank
But
of
you
America.
came over here with Bank. You were
I
here
came
for
with
a
Bank of
year,
America,
right?
and then Bank of America had some financial troubles. Also, they weren't, although they were established in Japan, they weren't a full branch in Japan.
Okay.
So for regulatory reasons, they had to move the traders to Hong Kong,
Okay.
which meant I had to go to Hong Kong. I've been in Japan just over a year. I'd say I enjoyed Japan so much. I was enjoying Japan so much. 85, 86.
Was there office by any chance the red brick building that sits right across from the palace?
That was the bank's building.
That
You're
was
right.
the bank was right there, and it said Bank of
Yeah.
America right above it. And
Yeah.
right, if you stood in front of the fountain,
Yeah.
your backdrop would be them.
That was the commercial bank.
Okay.
We actually,
Because I had an account there.
I actually worked in BA Asia, and that
Yeah.
was Hibiya City. It was
Mhm.
the edge of
Right.
off of Hibiya Dora.
Right.
The
Go
edge
over
of
there. They have
Hibiya
your city
Park.
now. Yeah.
I used
Hibiya Park.
to walk
Hibiya
to
Hibiya Park.
I used to walk to the bank sometimes.
Right.
Kokusai building it was called.
Type building. Yes.
Yeah, the big red one.
Right.
In fact, that's where.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, that's where my wife worked.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I met my wife at the Bank of America Christmas party.
Because in those days, you could actually get if you're an American, you could have your Bank of America account. Because I went there and got an
Yeah.
account and had my account there.
Yeah.
I sure did.
Yeah, I remember going there to get some cash.
Mhm.
Because I did
Yeah,
account
right.
there
You
as
could
well.
do that, right?
Yeah.
You do before you went to travel. You'd always go there, exchange your yen into dollars, and
Yeah.
vice versa,
Yeah.
because the dollar was a lot stronger
Yeah.
too. So.
Yeah, but the bank, the commercial bank, BAG was in, say, he'd be a city,
Mhm.
and the bank,
Right.
the big red building,
Big red
by,
building, yes.
by the
Palace,
Tokyo
yeah.
Station.
Tokyo Station, right?
Yeah.
Just before you get to Tokyo Station.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Yeah.
okay, so you were from Bank of America. After you were here for a year, then you went to
I
your
went
your
to
favorite
B-
place.
B
Your
of
favorite
A,
place, Hong Kong.
which would have been great had I gotten to Hong Kong first. Before
Right,
coming
but
to
you'd
Japan.
already been here.
But I mean, Hong Kong is better in some respect. I mean, it's much better for sport, squash.
Right.
The level of squash in Hong Kong is
Right.
much higher, much deeper than in Japan.
Right.
So I got after 6 months in Hong Kong, I decided that no, I want to go back
So
to
you
Tokyo.
get to some place that's civil, and people actually get in a queue,
Yeah.
and if you stand on the curb, you don't have to worry about a car coming up on the curb to run over your feet.
But you think you'll find there's lots of people who've been to Japan and come back a second time or even third time, from working overseas.
But you know, I found the other too that people that started in Hong Kong don't want to come to Japan because everything moves so slow.
Yeah, we get used to a
The,
certain way.
the stock market here does not move. I mean,
No.
really, you can watch the sun set. Nothing's going to happen. It'd be the same thing. But in Hong Kong, poof, very fast.
Yeah. So to get back to
Yeah.
Tokyo, I left Bank of America and got a job at Union Bank of Switzerland, UBS.
Now, this is something you did purposely.
Yeah.
You
Not-
didn't have an executive search
Not
person
because I had a
come
problem with Bank of America, but because I wanted to get back to Tokyo in terms of
Right.
lifestyle
Okay.
and work.
But you weren't married yet, but
No.
the person you were going to marry
Married.
eventually was already here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I returned to Tokyo in end of '86 for UBS,
Hmm.
and then we spent 3 years, got married here, had a child, and after the child was born, I decided we'd go back to the UK in '89.
You planned on going, you didn't want to stay here
No, I thought it was right now I had a family, go back home to England.
and raise your family there.
Yeah, but what I didn't realise was, obviously, married to a Japanese.
She might have other opinion.
Yes. Well, my wife was fluent in English, having worked for Bank of America. She was fluent in English, but the difference between being fluent and culturally understand different countries.
Mhm.
And I also, when we moved back to England, we moved outside London. I commuted into London.
How long was your commute?
An hour.
Oh, shit.
So
You were
basically-
really outside of
So
London.
basically, I was gone from 6 in the morning to 9 at night.
And no kind of family time.
So that didn't last very long. I mean, it was basically either returned to Japan or the marriage was in trouble. So UBS decided, yes, you can go back to Japan for us. So I returned to Japan in September 1990. I've been back in England for 18 months.
But if you had your choice, if it was up to you, would you have stayed there even though you had an hour commute back and forth? Let's say your wife said, okay, it's no problem.
I mean, I enjoyed being in. I must admit, Japan's special. I enjoy being I enjoy being in Japan because I was special
Right.
as a foreigner.
Yeah.
So in some
Still
respects,
are. Still are.
yeah, in some respects, Japan made sense for me as well. But it
Mm.
made sense from a personal perspective for my family. So I came back here in the end of 1990, and I've been here ever since.
Okay. Do you have intentions of going back?
Wait and see what happens after COVID.
Okay, so
I mean, we're happy here, but say, long story short, my daughter's now in England, so we're not sure yet.
Okay.
But we'll see what happens after COVID.
Right. But you like the green. I mean, growing up where you had all the sports available, all this greenery in it. Now
Yeah.
it's hard to come by.
Yeah.
You have to admit, if you're living in the middle of Tokyo.
Yeah, but Tokyo is also a very beautiful city.
It is, no, it's
Yeah.
for sure. If
Yeah.
you like concrete,
Yeah.
it's no problem. If you like
Yeah.
concrete, steel,
Mm.
a lot of asphalt, it's really nice.
I mean,
But
one thing I do in England, I used to do in England regularly, was play golf. I haven't played golf in Japan since the 1990s.
because it's very expensive.
It's
for
very
one thing.
expensive
Very expensive,
and
and you have to
very
go too far.
time-consuming.
You spend all day to play
Yeah.
one round.
That's the one sport-wise, that's the one negative, is the golf.
But you
Second
should-
negative is the football or the soccer.
Right, but you're not giving up. You're not giving
No.
up any time for squash because
No.
you're
No,
on that court.
Yeah.
I think you've gotten your name etched in the floor
I
and the
can play more
walls
squash
and
here.
everything else.
I can play more squash here even when my daughter was growing up here. like I could be allowed to play if I was in England with the wife and kid.
Yeah. Well, first of all, because your commute was so long too. That's one thing.
Yeah.
My
Here I've never lived outside. My longest commute from here is like been 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's the one thing I do like. See, I'm just the opposite. I like the country and I like to have the greenery every now and then, but I love the city.
Yeah. I
love the convenience of the city.
I wasn't a city person until I came to Japan, but I've been in Japan.
Convenient.
You have to be in the city.
You do,
especially as a foreigner who understands Japanese and understands the Japanese person and personality, but doesn't really speak it. So I can't listen to Japanese TV. I listen to BBC or CNN or watch films in English.
That's right. Which they have plenty of.
Yeah.
I mean now, but when we first came here, you were lucky if you got a VHR or something like that, VHS, and you could watch that every now and then. So after you finished at the Bank of America, you came back from Hong Kong, you came back here. What did you do then?
UBS.
UBS.
And I went back to London with UBS, but that wasn't successful. On the personal side, became it here in end of 1990, working for UBS. And then I was actually approached by Lehman Brothers in 94. Joined Lehman Brothers in 94 to do the same job, fixed income, selling corporate bonds to Japanese, non-Japanese investors overnight while the home markets were closed. I left Lehman Brothers in the end of 97.
Lucky you.
Lehman Brothers were going for a tough time and they downsized and I got downsized. It happens in the business.
Always, yes.
I got a job at Barclays Capital. I was at Barclays Capital from 1998 till 2011. A long time. But again,
and when did you retire?
I retired last year. I left Barclays in 2011 and joined Mizuho Bank.
Mizuho Bank, okay. Doing the same job?
Doing the same job. Okay. And then in 2014, my ex-boss at Barclays, who had joined Jefferies in New York, approached me to work for Jefferies in Tokyo. So I started working for Jefferies in Tokyo 2014, and then retired in June last year, having spent 49 years in the business.
So after 49 years, so did you always plan to retire after a while, and did you have any age, or did you have any particular amount of time?
I thought about retirement as you do throughout the course of your career. I mean, as I said to you, one of the things we did do is when I was younger was we applied to emigrate to Canada. Through the process where you loan them money for a 5-year period, interest free, and they repay you after 5 years. That gives you the right of citizenship.
But you still have to live there.
Yeah, I had to live there. After gaining citizenship, you had to live there for 2 years after the next 5. But I was still working. Didn't see any chance of working in Canada. It's a very different environment. So I let the citizenship lapse, but luckily enough, it applies to all members of the family. And my daughter, through the citizenship, ended up going to school in Canada, boarding school. And then
she went there from the age of 15?
14, yeah.
14?
Yeah.
By her own choice?
Her own choice.
And I asked you during lunch, I said, you didn't plant a seed?
No.
Your wife didn't plant a seed?
I'm from a very working class background. So I left school at 16. My daughter left school, my sister left school at 15. My brother left school at 14.
So your daughter's the first in your family?
My daughter's my first in my family even to go to college.
Wow.
And so it was her choice. She was going to Sacred Heart, which is a very good school in Irol. But it was an all-girls school, and she wanted a change. And we had some friends who just returned to Canada. He was Canadian, his wife was Japanese, and they'd just been through the process a year before and found some schools. And they had one school near where they lived, which was very good, called Ashbury College, who were crying out for Japanese students.
So they were considering her Japanese?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because she's half Japanese.
Right.
I mean, even today.
Does she look more like you or your wife?
She looks like me.
So she didn't look Japanese then. If you look at it, there are people who think
like
she's.
Me. But and one of the things about Japan, which is very sad.
So she has to tell people sometimes that she actually has a Japanese mother.
You can see,
We know because we live here.
When she's in Japan, she looks Western. When she's in
Outside
England
of that,
or
then
the
she looks
States,
more Asian.
you can see the Asian features. You
Okay.
can see she's half Japanese, half English, and you can tell by looking at her that she's half Japanese and half English.
Okay.
But she's more Japanese when she's in England or the States.
Very interesting.
And she's more English when she's
here.
in Japan.
Okay.
But that was her choice to go to Canada, and I said, never have dreamt that a daughter of mine go to a boarding school in Canada, a boarding school anywhere for that matter.
And you said you and your wife said if there's anything,
to this day, it's the best thing we've ever done for our daughter. By far and away the best
sending
thing.
her to boarding school.
But it was her choice, and she was 14, and she was ready for it.
Did you have kind of regrets, thinking that I don't want to let go of her yet, or?
I didn't have regrets. Mum, I must admit, Mum, I was very impressed with Mum because Mum agreed to it, and then having agreed to it for the first 5 months she was there, she had to go every month to see her. Cause
You mean she actually flew back and forth 5 months in a row? Wow.
A week at a time for the first 5 months.
To make sure she's okay.
She's okay.
Right. No, she's trying to make sure she's okay.
And then became Christmas, so Zoe came back to here. She was having some second thoughts, but she went back to Canada.
Who was having second thoughts? Your wife or your daughter?
Was having second thoughts because she was now getting homesick. She's been in Canada for 5 months.
After your wife going every month for 5 months?
Yeah, but yeah.
That's why she's getting homesick, because your wife was probably cooking for her and everything else.
But my wife, but my daughter was getting homesick, so she even checked on the ASIJ website. But then she went back to Canada after Christmas vacation, and it had started snowing. And there's a border every weekend in Canada. They went skiing.
Mm-hmm.
And so she started going skiing. Also, the longer she was there, the school she was at was 80% day students, 20% boarders. So,
Okay.
but they were attending the same class.
Uh-huh.
So she made more friends,
That's
which
right.
were day students. So she was invited. Oh, Zoe, come over for the weekend. We're going away for the country. We're going away to the country. We're going out skiing. So she was spending weekends out of the school,
Right.
but with day students, with normal Canadians.
No,
not-
right. Instead of the people that would just come from
not-
other countries.
Yeah, not
Right.
organised weekends.
Right.
And say, the friends of ours were acting as guardians for the first, while she was at school, but after the first 6 months, I think even the first year, they only saw her 2 weekends. Rest of the time, she was busy. She was taken care of. She was some things to do. So she was fine. So it worked out well for Zoe. And even then, after Christmas, the first year, Mum never went again until June, when school closed, and August, or end of August, beginning of September, when school started. So we'd go to Canada in August, and so we'd go to Canada in June, and end of August or beginning of September.
Right.
What
What was her degree in? She studied.
She basically studied home. It wasn't. It's to do with science, but it's to do with the food industry. I'm not quite sure what they call it. But she now works for the Wellcome Trust, and she works for a big charity in the UK called the Wellcome Trust. She's actually a paid employee, but she deals with food education, nutrition.
Right.
She also specialises in, obviously, a lot of these supermarkets, a lot of these restaurants have massive amounts of food which is approaching the sell-by date.
Oh, I see.
So they arrange to take that food
And distribute it
to
people need it. Oh, that's.
and she now she runs. She's very, very active inside.
So she doesn't talk about ever coming back to live in Japan.
She loves the fact. I mean, sometimes you can be a child of a different race, like half,
Right.
and you can be very not in either camp.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true. Yes.
But Zoe loves the fact that she's half Japanese and half English.
And
She loves the fact that Mum and Dad are in Japan, so she gets to come back.
Oh, to come back to this part because she has a lot of fond memories.
Lots of.
She
She loves Japanese.
loves
She
Japan.
still has friends here from school,
Oh.
and we love the fact that she's in England.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Zoe is say she's 31. And she's also she's very smart. One thing she did during the COVID, England does a lot of bad things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing they did do was the injection system. You know, the injection system in England is very good, one of the best in the world. Well, Zoe volunteered to work at a jab centre 6 months ago. So she went away for a day to a hospital to be trained how to give injections.
Right.
She now works 1 day a week at King's Cross giving injections. But because she's given injections, she's had both her injections. She's 31. She's had both her injections. She gets tested every 3 days.
Every 3 days, wow.
And also she said, Dad, it's funny. She said, I had a Japanese come into the clinic last week, and they were so happy that I could speak to her in Japanese.
I bet they were.
Yeah.
I bet they were.
Because she could explain to them in Japanese,
Exactly
what was going on. I mean, they could speak English, because obviously most Japanese in England can speak a certain amount of English.
Mm-hmm.
She could explain to them in Japanese what was going on, what was happening, and what was the next step to it. And they said they were so happy to speak Japanese to her.
Mm-hmm.
But say, for mum and dad, we're very happy because, say, Zoe's been fully vaccinated. I am 66. I get vaccinated
Soon,
first time in 2 weeks' time.
Uh-huh.
My wife expects to hear sometime in September.
You're retired now.
Yeah.
So how do you spend your days?
Well, because of the COVID, I mean, I've not been on vacation. My wife's not been on vacation. We've not been anywhere. We've not travelled outside Tokyo.
But so, say, once it lifts, what do you plan on doing?
Well,
Let's say for the first couple of months, what do you see your life being like? Let's say
I'd
they
like
said no more masks, everyone's good, we're all
I'd like to go back
inoculated.
to England and see family and friends.
That's what you do?
See our daughter.
Yes.
We haven't seen her. Our daughter comes home.
Oh, you wouldn't bring her
Christmas.
here? You'd go there.
Well, she'll come here at Christmas,
Okay.
but we haven't seen her since.
It started, yeah.
For almost 2 years. So
Right.
we're basically we'd like to go and see her.
But the one thing I have to say, Trevor, that I like about us in this era is the fact that technology has made it so that we really don't feel like we did when we were younger.
Yeah.
We get to see them FaceTime. It's like
Yeah.
being there. So you're going to know every pimple she's had,
Yeah.
how she styled her hair,
Yeah.
because we get to see each other.
Yeah. I mean,
And that's been the saving grace, don't
I
you
mean,
think?
I agree. Zoe
Yes.
phones every weekend,
And you get to see her, and you know whatever you're seeing of her place, she can show you her place and everything.
her and her mother have a 2 hour phone call. I have a 2 minute phone call with my daughter, and
Right.
my wife's on the phone for 2 hours. It's fine, because I can tell. All I need to do is listen to Zoe's voice,
Mm-hmm.
and once you hear when you talk to someone, you from the tone of the voice, what's up?
Right, especially your daughter, yes. Of
So
course.
talk to her for 2 minutes. Oh, she sounds fine, great. And in fact,
How's the mom gonna
Zoe went on her first vacation for over a year last week. She went to Scotland. She went up to the island of Mull, travelling around Scotland.
Had a ball?
Yeah,
Had a
good
good
time.
See, the nice thing too, they don't have to send pictures. They say, Dad, look.
Yeah.
And just show you.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
completely different.
But
I
I'd
love
like
this
to,
time.
I have not left Japan for over 2 years.
Yeah.
And until COVID is sorted, there's no point, even with the injections, there's no point until everyone's.
That's true. Completely. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Trevor, I want to thank you for the
My
time,
pleasure.
for doing this, not knowing what you were going to do,
No.
never doing anything like this before, not knowing how it's going to turn out, never seen any of these,
Yeah.
not knowing it all. I thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you
the
very
time
much.
to do this.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to tell all of you, thank you for watching this podcast. Make sure that you click like, subscribe, and leave a comment. As I always say, it's all unknown, and keep reaching for the stars.